Hey, AP testers, Liberty North High School. This is Mr. Davis. This is prep session number 3. Okay, so it is April 29th. Test prep session number 3. Okay, all right. So, we've kind of covered. We went over everything on question 2. All right, and then what I want to do is kind of just spend each day going through each chapter, each unit of AP Psych, just to make sure you're ready, and you kind of have. Just to kind of get the information fresh in your mind. I thought that would be probably good if we did a real quick, I think we've got time to do a refresher. And then that way we can kind of hit the big things. You kind of still have it more fresh in your mind, right? Primacy, recency effect, okay? And then we'll kind of do some practice questions as we get closer to the 19th, because we've got a long time before the quiz, okay? Now, also, first announcement for today is that you need to get on your email, because AP sent out a very good email today with some very, very good information for all testers. So, and one of them is there is an AP exam demo on May 4th. Okay, so that's Monday. So there's actually going to be a little demo where they kind of walk you through the technology part of it, aspect of it. So that way you can be, and I think from what I read, you can do the demo more than once. So that way you can be familiar with the process of the technology side of it, which will just help you test better. So, they also sent out some things about webinars, a checklist, exam day checklist, pre-checklist. So there's just a lot. AP is doing a phenomenal job of sending out resources and information for you guys to use. So again, go to, so the link to all that is on Canvas. So I put that under your AP exam survival guide. So you've got a link to AP Central, which will give you all your information. And then also I've got you the link to where they're putting all the new stuff up first. So for the COVID-19. So, and then I got a link to Fiveable on there, and all those, they have practice exams. I know the exam weeks leading up to, they're going to have exams for the subjects. So you guys got more stuff than what you need. And again, take advantage of it, because, who knows what this is going to be like. But I think all of that can help you. Now, again, I know, you're trying to finish up and so on and so forth. And some of you have other AP tests, but just make sure, that you kind of take advantage of all that stuff, because AP is really doing a great job. Very impressed with the stuff that they're sending out. So, but the big one I want to call your attention to is on May 4th, on Monday, is your AP exam demo day. So they're going to go over the technology side of it. So, hopefully you can be comfortable enough where you can remove that stressor on the test day, because that could get you pretty frazzled. And again, it's how you do on one day. So, anything that you can do to eliminate any of those stressors, you can, I would do that. Okay. All right. So we got question 2 taken care of, at least curriculum wise, right? So that's going to be research. Okay. So we talked about that. Pictures of that are on Twitter. All right. So today we're going to start going down content for question 1. Okay. Now, the first thing I want you to know is the first thing I would have, and the reason we do these in order, the first thing I would have is in my AP notebook and study is chapter 1, and then chapter 2 would be the very next one, which it was, because this is the second most hit subject topic on the AP test. Okay, so the AP, the College Board, really wants you to know that psychology is scientific, it's based on research, and it's also very biological. Okay, so they want you to know the neuroscience side. So more than likely, and I think it has, ever since I can remember, you're going to have neuroscience on question 1 in some aspect. Okay, so chapter 2 is going to be there, and it might even creep its way into number 2, which it has before as well. So, again, question 1 is 25 minutes. This is 55% of your grade. This is concept application. So this is going to be just like a question that we do, and we've done kind of a whole second semester where I was working you up towards, which is, you're going to have to apply, okay, information to an overarching question. All right. And they're going to want to make sure that you can apply it to real life, okay, which we talked about, which is their goal. Okay. So anywhere from chapter 1 to 15, including the prologue, which is just the names. So you've got that in your AP notebook. Explain behavior and apply theories to real life situations. Okay. So they want to make sure that you can apply psychology to, real life stuff. Okay. You have 8 tasks. Okay. So again, that's going to be just like when I ask you a question and then you had 8 vocab, you had 5 vocab or 3, you're going to have 8 this time. Okay. You're going to have 8 concepts or vocab terms that you're going to have to apply to the question. Okay. All right. So Chapter 2, biology and behavior and neuroscience, all right? That you need to know that chapter. So make sure you go back over that in your AP notebook. So again, what they're gonna test you on is your essential questions, which I think are the big ones here, okay? Because if you notice, those are the big general questions. So I list those at the beginning of every chapter in AP Learning Targets. I list the 1 or 2 essential questions for that chapter, okay? And then your AP Learning Targets, okay? Your questions and your information are gonna come from those too, okay? So you kind of already know, you have hints of what they're gonna ask you. So make sure you're familiar with those. Make sure you can answer the AP Learning Targets. Make sure you can answer the essential questions, okay? All right, and then also make sure you access your AP notebook on brain structures. That's why that's there, okay? Because that's probably gonna happen. It's very rare that they actually put a brain structure in there, but they're going to give you something that they're going to give you a context or in the question of something that would relate to a specific brain structure, and then it should be in your answer. Okay, so usually they're going to give you a situation on this chapter. They give you a medical condition, a disorder. Like I know they've done synesthesia in the past. You know, they'll pick a disorder or an illness or something different or unique. And then they're going to want you to basically explain the benefits, the deficits of that, and then how that would impact behavior and the neurology of the brain. Okay. All right. So make sure you go over those. Right. And so again, if you've been keeping track of the brain structures, again, you know that there are major ones that we go over, but we went over kind of all the components in chapter 2. Okay. So hopefully those are familiar. All right. So, you know, for every chapter that we're going to cover, you need to make sure you go over your essential questions and your AP Learning Targets, okay? But then also your brain structures here, okay? So make sure you know that. So again, hypothalamus, which we've talked about, frontal lobe, okay? Then, you know your limbic system, which are your thalamus, hypothalamus, amygdala, hippocampus, okay? Know the frontal lobe, know your lobes, frontal, right? Parietal, temporal, occipital, okay, going backwards. Okay, you got your medulla, your your hindbrain, midbrain, forebrain. Okay, all that we talked about, and there's actually a document on Canvas. Don't forget about that in the announcements. There's the guided tour of the brain. So if you are missing anything, you can look at that as well. Okay. Okay. So I'm gonna grab my book real quick, and I'm just gonna walk us through chapter 2. Just so I don't forget anything, and make sure that you guys have the important stuff that I know that's tested before. So if you have your book, if you don't, that's fine. I'm just going to go to the beginning of chapter 2. Okay, so the essential questions for chapter 2 are: how can biology influence our behavior and mental processes? Okay, so again, the essential questions are overarching. They're big, and you can actually use information from other chapters in the essential questions. So how does biology influence it? Okay, so again, chapter 2, chapter 3 is genetics, but you could definitely talk about some genetics in there, which we'll talk about that one tomorrow, okay? So anything that relates to that biology part is going to be it will be in some context on your question number 1, okay? What happens when a particular neurotransmitter is absent from the body, okay? Whether it's, hey, you have too much or not enough of it, okay? And how do biological and environmental factors interact to influence our behaviors and mental processes, okay? So nature, nurture. Okay, so, all right, so make sure, again, you're gonna need to know neural connection. So make sure you understand how neurons are connected and how they communicate to each other. So, your dendrites, your axon terminals, your axon, the cell body, right, okay? Neurotransmitters, which are in the gap. Okay, make sure you know that process. Action potential, know that it's neurochemical. Okay, electrochemical. Your 3 types of neurons: motor and inter. Okay, sensory neurons are input, motor are output, and then your interneurons are the brain. Okay, the kind of processing part of it. And then again, look at your notes on. We spent a whole. I gave you the notes on that chart on, whether it increases neurotransmitter or decreases neurotransmitter, right? What are the 3 things that can increase it, 3 things that can decrease it? Okay, that was in your lab for chapter 2, so you can look at that as well. It's on page 57. So again, know that the three things that happen when a neuron fires is there's reception, the neurotransmitters cross the gap, there's reuptake, so the sending neuron then sucks the neurotransmitters back up to replenish, and you have enzymes sweep in and kind of digest everything and clear the gap, okay? So I can manipulate on how much or how little a neuron fires and neurotransmitters are communicated by manipulating that process, okay? So we talked about that's exactly what medication does, SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Okay, so it blocks the reuptake of serotonin, which means that it increases serotonin in that gap so that we have more. Okay, those are your common antidepressants. I would also know the chart on page 58 of the neurotransmitters. So there are some ones in there, like acetylcholine was used, I think, last year. You got dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. I think those would be the big ones. The book actually shows you serotonin and dopamine tracks. Those are two big ones to make sure that you know. Okay. Know the difference between an agonist and an antagonist. That actually vocab has actually been used specifically on the test before. Okay. So you need to know an antagonist blocks, okay, or lowers the amount of neurons or neurotransmitters that are communicated, and an agonist increases it or mimics it. Okay. Know the divisions of the nervous system. You got a nice chart on page 61. Okay, so the different parts of the nervous system, what they control. And then with that, you also need to know the endocrine system as well. Know some glands, especially that adrenal gland, which I told you to specify on, which is connected to your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Know that the endocrine system uses hormones that travel through the bloodstream, okay, which are much slower than the neurons and neurotransmitters that are firing in my brain. Know how we study the brain. So MRI, CAT scan, PET scan, fMRI. I think we even talked about SPECT imaging, which is on a video in chapter 16 and 17. Okay. EEG. All right. And then also don't forget the movie Awakening. So delves a lot into this one. So you can use that. You can see that. And then know your whole chart of the brain. So then look at your brain structures, okay, in your AP notebook, and then go back to that lab of chapter 2, and then you can look at your notes there where we take the guided tour of the brain. But again, just know, so we went hindbrain, midbrain, forebrain, right? Okay. So your hindbrain is your medulla, your pons, which control the autonomic stuff, which are the automatic stuff that we don't have to worry about. And then you've got your limbic system in the middle of the brain, okay? And then you've got your lobes, and the outside of that cerebral cortex and the cerebrum. Again, frontal lobe, hypothalamus are big, okay? To be honest, I don't know, here's this, but generally you could kind of answer the question by throwing those two structures in there. So they generally always apply. You might know the case of Phineas Gage, right? Okay, so railway worker that got the rod shot through his head and went through his left frontal lobe, and then it completely changed his behavior. And that's really what they're going to kind of do, is kind of ask you a question like that, give you a situation or ask you about the Phineas Gage. Why was it important to psychology? How did it show biological and environmental factors in Gage's change in behavior? So on and so forth, okay? So again, the frontal lobe changed his personality, a limp on the right side, you know, that type of thing, okay? Also no aphasia, that's big. That was what I was going to forget. So no aphasia, so which is if I have left hemisphere, which is my language, right? Left hemisphere, right hemisphere differences, but in the left hemisphere I have my language. So if I have a stroke, which is lack of blood flow, lack of oxygen, or it could be bleeding in the brain, I'm, you know, generally on that left hemisphere, I'm going to develop a language impairment, which is aphasia. Okay, so remember Sarah Scott, we watched her videos. But there's Broca's and Wernicke's aphasia, which you do need to know the difference. Okay, those are on page 81. But Broca, again, is no speech. So I just said her name, Sarah Scott. So she had Broca's aphasia. Wernicke's is the struggle with comprehension after it's over. Then you need to know split brain research, okay, which is on page 84. So we talk about split brain Joe. We watched his videos. So in severe types of epilepsy. Again, remember, we'll sever the corpus callosum, which is the brain structure that connects my two hemispheres together. We'll actually cut that, and then that is the last resort treatment for severe epilepsy. Okay. Now, that does come with its consequences and side effects because, again, the two hemispheres can no longer communicate to each other. So you have an independent left and an independent right brain. Okay. And split brain has been on there as well as aphasia. They like to refer to those two. Okay. And then just know stuff about handedness. They often ask a handedness question. So just know, definitely that left-handers are the rarer types, right? We live in a right brain and a right-handed world. So, that can even, and then the debate on whether is that biological or is it environmental, is it nature or nurture? Okay. All right. So that's kind of a walk through chapter 2 and stuff that you're probably going to need to know. So again, I would probably definitely read chapter 1 and read chapter 2. I mean, again, those are going to be the most covered. And also I would read chapter 3 with genetics, although I think, as long as you kind of understand the big things of chapter 3, you should be good. But, I'd make sure I go back. But again, all that AP learning target stuff, you need to go back and make sure you can answer that. If you can answer those questions for chapter 2, chapter 1, then you're good. Okay. Again, and the essential questions, because that's what AP publishes that they're going to test you on. So, you need to make sure you have that information. Okay. So, now a lot of them are general questions, which again, that's what they like, is they like big questions so that you can apply and put the information you have in your mind on the page. So there are many different ways to answer it. But, so like if they ask you to they give you, let's say, aphasia, and they say, okay, what is a brain structure involved in this? What could be an environmental factor involved in this? They're leaving it open. So there are a lot of right answers, but you just need to make sure that you apply and explain your information. Okay. All right. So chapter 2 is a biggie. So make sure that you know it. And then we'll start with chapter 3. We'll go through 3 tomorrow, which is another big one. So guarantee almost 100% that you're going to have some type of biology of behavior, neuroscience question, part of it on question number 1. I mean, there's just always there. The research and the biology are just always a part of the question. So you have to know chapter 2. You have to know chapter 3. Those are the big ones there. Okay. So, and then sensation a little bit, but we'll go over that one together each day. So again, some of our chapters we combine, so we'll just go over those together. But we got more than enough time to do that. So we'll do that together. Okay. If you have any questions or any information for the good of the group, you can chat it here, or you can send it to me and I can make sure I cover it. But the best thing I want you to get out today is you need to know chapter 2, right? You need to know biology of behavior. It's going to be in a part of question 1. Okay, it absolutely will be. Number 2 is make sure you're checking AP and your email, because they are sending out great stuff. So go to the links that I provided on Canvas, but you should actually get an email, right? And that's how that they know that you're going to test. You've been registered. But you have a demo day on May 1st, so put those in your calendars. And I think you just need to make sure that you feel familiar with the technology so it doesn't influence your testing grade. Okay. All right. So that's the plan. So we're going to go through each chapter, work through the main stuff. I know it's kind of fast, but you have all this information. We already went over it. Make sure, again, you're using your AP notebook. And the other thing is just the vocab, which I don't have here. Okay. Vocab stuff. All right. So make sure, you go over the vocab. Okay, which you should have in your AP notebook. All right. So start with your AP notebook. If you go through and all the vocab looks familiar, if you feel like you can answer all the AP learning targets and you're familiar with all the brain structures, I think you're good. Now you might, because they tell you, but if there's anything in there, like they mention aphasia, they mention split brain, all that stuff is there. So, and if something doesn't look familiar, go back and read it, okay, or research it and find it for yourself, okay? Okay. All right, that's chapter 2. We'll see you tomorrow, and we'll continue on with chapter 3, genetics. All right. Email me or let me know if you have any questions.